Hi, welcome to the 2019 Report and Advisory Board Review Commission public hearing. Noticing a quorum with all of the commissioner members present, we'll call this meeting to order. Hello, commissioners, agency representatives, members of the public, either here who are present or are watching. My name is Jeff Tamkitikasem. I'm the chair for the Report and Advisory Board Review Commission. Today, the Commission is holding its 2019 hearing as required by the New York City Charter. We will discuss the current status of the Commission, revisit our shared values, and hear from a couple of agencies on reports they believe meet our requirements for waiver. We will not be holding a vote today, but all testimonies will be taken as advisory in nature, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss them as a Commission. I'd like to take a moment first for the commissioners to introduce themselves. So if I can actually start, am I right?
Kwame Akosa, Law Department.
Brad Reed, City Council.
Zach Pyle, Mayor's Office of Management and Budget.
Rose Martinez, New York City Council.
John Russell, New York City Council.
Stacy Gardner, Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications.
So as a reminder, we as a group are tasked with reviewing the city's existing reporting and advisory board requirements and waiving those that are either no longer relevant, overly cumbersome, or duplicative. We are able to waive reporting requirements in whole or in part and aim at alleviating the reporting burden on agencies while at the same time maintaining the wealth of publicly available information that comes from them where relevant. We have a few agencies in attendance today who we have invited to give testimony. The Department of Correction will start off. We also have the Department of Citywide Administrative Services who will provide testimony, both providing the Commission with proposals for reports to be waived last year. And today we will also hear about them in more detail and their responsibilities in general. Additionally, the Department of Records and Information Services, DORIS, is here to speak to the city's overall reporting requirements and the state of reports in the city. Before we open the room up to further testimony and these agencies, do the commissioners have any opening comments? I'd like to invite them if they do. Anybody? Okay. Well, thank you very much. We'd like the first agency to speak, DOC, if we can have you up. That would be great. Thank you so much. As a point of order, we'll let every agency speak, and then we'll give a little time for any questions or answers from the commission, and then move on to the next agency. So after each one, we'll just break for a little time to question. Great.
Good morning, Chair Tim Sam, and members of the Report and Advisory Board Review Commission. My name is Dana Lax, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Department of Corrections. Thank you for this opportunity to testify before the Commission on the Department's council-mandated reporting requirements. Unlike most city agencies, the Department of Corrections is overseen by and responsible for producing detailed reports to numerous oversight agencies, including the City Council, the Board of Corrections, the State Commission of Corrections, the State Legislature, and the Federal News Monitor. In many cases, reporting requirements make us better. Through reporting requirements, we can monitor trends, set benchmarks, and make evidence-based decisions. Further, regular reporting provides a window into the department's operations and supports our efforts to build the public's trust. However, the more reporting requirements we have, the more potential there is for conflict between these reports. The department remains committed to transparency, but requests the assistance of this commission to ensure the process of being transparent does not hinder our ability to focus on safety, security, and meaningful reform. Today, I will provide the commission with an overview of the various reporting requirements the department adheres to, followed by descriptions of some of these reports and the department's recommendations to waive or amend specific reporting requirements. Since 2015, the Council has greatly increased the number of bills enacted that contain reporting requirements. In same time period, the Board of Correction also steadily increased its regular reporting mandates. As of today, the department adheres to 25 distinct City Council reporting requirements and nearly the same number of reporting requirements from the Board of Correction. Together, the department is tasked to fulfill nearly 50 reporting requirements from these two entities alone, many of which require the department to submit these reports on a bi-monthly, monthly, quarterly, and semi-annual intervals. Several of these reports produce duplicative information, requiring the department to collect information in a manner that does not provide us with greater insight into our own operations, or are in conflict with each other. With an understanding that the Commission has jurisdiction over local laws that are 3 years or older, the following reports have been carefully selected and put forth for a waiver or amendment based on their repetitive, ineffective, or overly burdensome nature. Since Local Law 90 of 2015 was passed, the Department's use of restricted housing units has changed significantly. Local Law 90 requires reporting on the number of 18 to 21-year-olds in punitive segregation, but as of 2016, the Department no longer houses young adults in punitive segregation. Further, the law requires the Department to report on sentence intervals, such as 31 to 90 days, 90 to 180 days, 180 to 365 days, or more than 365 days. These intervals vastly exceed the Department's board-mandated infraction sentence length in nearly all cases. Infraction sentence length is limited to 30 days, with the exception of the cell phone staff, which is limited to 60 days. Producing quarterly reports that suggest there could be sentence lengths that exceed those limits is counterproductive to the Department's reform efforts and undermines our efforts to build trust with the community. The law further requires the Department to report on the number of days of inmate recreation and number of inmate shower days. These indicators are unnecessary, as individuals housed in these units are afforded recreation time and showers on a daily basis. The Department has worked hard to reform its policies and practices surrounding punitive segregation, and it is important that the reporting requirements are updated to reflect this. Thus, the Department requests that the outdated sections of this report be waived. Local Law 121 of 2016. Local Law 121 of 2016 states that it requires the Department to report annually on the number of and rate of individuals discharged to the community with mental illness and the number and rate at which these individuals are readmitted to DSU custody within a year of their discharge. However, diagnosis and treatment of mental illness is protected health information known only to NYC Health and Hospitals, and as a result, the Department is compelled to report on discharges and recidivism rates for individuals with an M designation. That is, individuals who visit mental health 3 or more times over the course of their stay. M designation covers the gamut between individuals who avail themselves of mental health services and individuals with serious mental health needs. It should not be seen as a representation of the Department's seriously mentally ill population. Ultimately, the utility of this report is unclear. As a result of a federal consent judgment, the Department is required to provide all M-designated individuals with discharge planning and produce them to the clinic prior to their release. Without additional information from the Department of Social Services, NYC Health and Hospitals, or service providers who support individuals following their reentry to the community, Local Law 121 of 2016 fails to collect enough information to guide the city in an evidence-based process to reduce recidivism among this population. Given these shortcomings, the Department suggests that this report be waived and replaced with a report that collects information on post-release adherence to planning and programming, as well as recidivism rates for mentally ill or undesignated populations. Local Law 122 of 2016. Local Law 122 requires the Department to evaluate and report on programming provided to individuals in custody. Programming is a critical service which can support a decrease in an individual's criminogenic risk factors, ultimately creating safer facilities and safer communities. The Department agrees that reporting on programming services provides a critical layer of transparency and accountability to the public. That said, it's unclear why Local Law 121 of 2016 only requires, Local Law 122 of 2016 only requires reporting on a subdivision of the Department's programming efforts. In addition to vocational programs, the law asks the Department to report on counseling, cognitive behavioral therapy-based programs, and drug dependency programs, or programs of any other similar purpose, all of which are clinical programs outside of the Department's purview. As a remedy, and to better enable the Department to share its work with the public, the Department suggests aligning the reporting requirements with our categories for defining programs. Activities, which include organized events and recreation; enrichment, which includes art and performing art-based programs that support critical thinking and visualization skills; evidence-based programs, which are facilitated by a trained staff person or a contract provider, and include education programs and non-clinical behavior programs, and reentry programs, which prepare individuals for release. Realigning this report will support the department in meeting its programming goals while enabling us to better communicate our programming philosophy to the public. In addition, rather than reporting on the number of individuals who are offered and utilize the program, the department suggests this report adhere to our new case management model and instead track the number of individuals referred to a program. Not every program is right for every person. This language will make clear how many people can actually benefit from the program in question. Similarly, the department requests that the language requiring reporting on the program's target population be removed. The target population are the individuals who can benefit from the program, which is dependent on a number of individualized factors. With a new acting deputy commissioner of programs bringing a new vision to the department programs division, programming is moving in a new and exciting direction, and we ask that this report be amended to support these changes. Local Law 124/2017. Local Law 124/2017 requires the department, in conjunction with the Criminal Justice Agency, to report on the implementation of the bail expedition program known as BACS. This report provides many useful insights on the implementation of the BACS program. However, the department is requesting a waiver from the final item of the report, which requires the department to report on the number of individuals whose admission to a DOC housing facility was delayed as a result of the BACS hold, and who also needed medical treatment. Because NYC Health and Hospitals conducts medical screenings prior to arraignment, any individual who requires immediate medical attention is escorted to a New York City Health and Hospitals facility prior to their arraignment. BACS holds are set following arraignment and thus following a pre-arraignment screening. If, following arraignment, CJA BACS hold, in a CJA BACS hold screening, an individual is urgently in need of medical services while waiting their surety, DOC activates EMS, which voids the BACS hold. There is no cross-section between individuals in need of urgent medical care and individuals on a BACS hold. As a result, it is not possible to report on this item. Local Law 216 of 2017. Local Law 216 of 2017 requires the department to report annually on incidents and investigations related to use of force. All of this information in this report is also found in the Federal Nunez Monitor Report, which is released on a semi-annual basis and provides much more in-depth information related to use of force investigations. In order to efficiently meet the requirements of the Nunez Report, the Department's Investigations Division tracks data of the use of force by calendar year. However, the Council report requires reporting on the fiscal year. These incongruous reporting periods require staff to spend a burdensome amount of time formatting data that has already been made public simply to fulfill the requirements of this law. The department requests this report be waived as it requires the department to duplicate its efforts in reporting on information related to investigations of use of force. By waiving or amending the aforementioned reports, the department will be able to focus its attention on more meaningful transparency efforts, safety and security measures, and overall reform without being hindered by duplicative or burdensome reporting. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before the Commission today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dana. I'd like to invite any commissioners to ask any questions they may have or make any statements.
Sure, I'll start. First, if I remember correctly, you worked for the city council previously?
I did.
Okay, so you have the benefit of coming at this from all sides, all perspectives.
Yes.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
So I did have a question on the Nunez Monitor Report, and I always give my caveat. I'm not even the most familiar with this within a 2-foot radius of myself right now. So this isn't my subject area. But you're saying the report is duplicative. Is every single piece of data that the council required also in the federal Nunez report? Are there any differences, and where's the Nunez report made available?
Nunez report is available online, and I'm happy to provide you with that website. I just don't have it off the top of my head. My understanding, and I can send this to the Commission following this hearing, but I can give you page by page where that information is. My understanding is the report question 1, which requires the department to report on the number and rate of the DOC investigation into use of force incidents. That is available on page 44 of the 8th Nunez Monitor Report, which lists which lists and identifies the total number of investigations into use of force by the monitoring period and compares it to the previous 2 periods. So it would be the preceding 6 months and then the 2 6-month periods prior to that.
Okay.
And I can provide you.
And at the time, because I see it's a local law from late in the year in 2017, I guess, probably end of session based on the local law number. Was the federal report being produced at that time?
I believe that it was. My understanding is that the council wanted this information, I believe, on just a different interval and more regular. It's not even more regularly because the Nunez report is biannually, but they wanted it on a different interval.
They were looking at fiscal year, right? Okay.
And is that report in terms of?
John, you got it.
So the Nunez report is required semi-annually. Is there a cutoff time as to producing that report? I mean, I imagine it's not in perpetuity.
Should the department meet all its obligations to remove itself from the consent judgment, that report would no longer be produced.
Okay.
We are in our 8th monitoring period, and while certainly we're making our very best efforts to meet all of the requirements of the consent judgment as quickly as possible, I do not believe that will happen in the next 6 months by any means.
Right. Okay.
So I certainly hope it does.
That's right. I'm actually particularly intrigued also on 2 things. One, obviously, a tenor of your kind of comments is also the public reads these and gets information beyond kind of agencies or councils that kind of look at them. Something like the punitive segregation, where a supposition of that is that somehow there is still punitive segregation occurring for 18 and 21, even though it has kind of ended. I just wonder if, are there any other places where you think that exists beyond these reportings? Like, have we done any for the Board of Correction, for other people? Is it just the council for these reportings? Yeah.
So the Board of Correction requires advance reports from the city
Yep.
council related to punitive segregation. In fact, we produce a 60-day report on punitive segregation indicators that is very similar to the report in Local Law 90 and also very similar to our Local Law 33 of 2016, which is our security indicator report for the entire population. In addition to the 60-day report, there are several other reports that capture information about individuals who are in punitive segregation and their linked connections.
But do those reports kind of better recognize kind of changes in the department's kind of policies, like the ending? Like, it's a good example because I think that, punitive segregation is no longer allowed for 18 to 21-year-olds, but there is a reporting asking for how many days punitive segregation is used for 18 and 21-year-olds. So just wondering if any other body outside of the reporting requirement here on the City Council would have that same mistake.
Sure. So at this point, I believe the board's reports are in line with the board's rules because the board's
Okay.
reports are required as a local variance, which is renewed every 6 months.
Got it.
However, we're moving to a restricted budget rulemaking process, and we imagine that these variances will be incorporated in a finalized rule on restricted housing in the next 2 or 3 months. As a result, there will be reporting requirements. There will be new reporting requirements that are going to be adhered to regarding punitive segregation once that rule is signed.
And then separate but similar, you mentioned the M designation and seriously mentally ill. Can you just speak to how, if your suggestion is actually that we'd start to track or have, who would track the post-release adherence to planning? And is that a DOC responsibility?
I do think that DOC plays an important role in this process, and certainly in any additional report that might be created, DOC could or should produce information that supports that effort. I know that certainly Monte is very involved in this effort. Certainly to the extent that health and hospitals has a division of these people that are in custody and has certainly as health and hospital facilities out in the community, I would imagine they would play a role as well as potentially departments such as
question on the local law
On section.
90. Question on the local law 90. You said the department no longer houses young adults. Is that a policy decision, or is that some local law that the city no longer holds 18, or can the next administration just change that policy?
It is a rule by Board of Corrections.
Okay. And those rules, okay. All right, thank you.
So I just, on the items that Jeff was talking about, just because I was wondering about this as I heard your testimony. So local law 90 of 2015, which I didn't check, so it's not a leading question, but I assume it's current, whatever the most recent one was submitted, and
It hasn't been amended since 2015.
it was a one-time report?
No, I'm sorry, we produce it on a quarterly basis.
Okay, yeah, but you're current on whatever the quarterly.
I believe that we are.
I didn't check. It's not a leading question. Okay. So, but when you provide the council with or provide the public with the report, for the categories that are no longer relevant, how is it marked on the report?
So, it is actually footnoted on the back. I can see it.
Okay, so there's like a 0 and a footnote, or there's like a NA or
It's 0 across, so it'll say the category says, young adults, and then by facility for different types of community segregation, and there'll be 0 across. And then on the second page, there's a series of footnotes that explain a number of reasons why we can't prepare various pieces.
Okay. Okay. And one of the other things that came up was the showers. And I hesitate slightly just because, again, this isn't my area of expertise, but my understanding is that there are people who are housed or supposed to be housed separately. And if they were not taking showers, it might be an indication that they were not being properly housed separately.
I believe I have an understanding of what population you might be referring to. That would not, I don't believe that would show itself on a PSEC report. Certainly, the department makes, so one of the populations that I imagine might feel uncomfortable, or what we've seen in the past have had issues or comfortability showering would be our transgender population. Our pre-teen works extremely hard to monitor every single person who is transgender in our custody. We've in fact expanded to pre-teen recently, just to shore up our efforts and make sure that individuals who are transgender and everyone we're achieving sexual safety across the facilities. Specifically, this report talks about PSEC allowance, so I'm not sure how we would, I'm not sure of the question, I guess, because somebody would have to be in segregation as a result of an infraction. The pre-teen would be monitoring their wellness and well-being. Yeah, I guess I'm not sure.
So, and again, not my area of expertise, my understanding was that this could be an indicator of not necessarily a problem with the showering requirement itself, but with the compliance with other requirements. So, I'll be honest and say I don't have the in-depth knowledge to go much
I'll just
further.
speak to this one from past experience and just say that it's an interesting question on kind of this and the way that, from a reporting, how an agency might communicate with the council, whoever is requiring the report, to update and better define what is kind of intended. Because in this case, for a set population around punitive segregation, say the number of shower days afforded presumes an old policy where it was not allowed, where it was not provided every day. And since a change in policy has provided for daily showers every day, it may be something that can be gotten with a different question, but this metric may not be appropriate for answering, which just for us as a commission, I think opens up a good conversation at some point about what at least is the interplay to kind of have agencies ask the question, or is this actually getting at what you want, or whatever the body may be, or whether or not we should at least negotiate what a different reporting requirement to get to the question. Because I think it's a good question, because I think that in this case it's simply a change of policy that no longer requires this if it's afforded every day. Whether people partake in it is a different thing, but that could be a different question. And then for this other population, it's not imputed as SAG, so it wouldn't be in this report. But yeah, it's a good.
And just to close up, thank you very much. I think just to close up the topic too, we are in, when somebody feels like they are not comfortably appropriate place, they have certainly a number of ways to communicate that to the department, including reaching out to various oversight bodies, and I have been in regular conversation with many of your colleagues regarding individuals when there is a concern about that individual placement, and certainly if there is information that we need to discuss in terms of reporting around that, I'm happy to continue that conversation.
Thank you.
Comment with
Just a quick question about local law 90 again. I looked at the local law before this meeting and I noticed there's somewhere around 40 elements to that report. So is this an exclusive list of all the elements that you're seeking or requesting a partial waiver for? I count 4 here.
I think these are our most important points, but
Okay.
I can certainly provide the commission with any additional information.
If you could, yeah, the complete list of the elements of the 40.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Hi. So this is definitely not my area of expertise. Just from your testimony, it seems like a lot of what might be required in some of these reports is tabular data. Were you consulting with your open data coordinator on this testimony or looking at these reports?
We have not, and I'm sorry, I don't know what tabular data specifically.
I'm sorry. It basically it's saying it's like the number of inmate recreation days. It's something that could be like in an Excel spreadsheet, which would be tabular data for, let's say, the open data portal. I think it might be effective for you to speak with your open data coordinator to see what parts of these reports could actually just be part of the yearly compliance of open data instead of perhaps putting it in this narrative report, and maybe seeing which parts might be better for that process, which might make it a little less administratively burdensome for you. That's just a suggestion. Otherwise, I have nothing to add.
I appreciate that, thank you. We'll look into it.
Great. Are there any other questions for Dana and the DOC presentation?
Just one more
Yes.
question. So on local law 122 of 2016, I noticed from your testimony you're requesting realigning this report. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by realigning?
Sure, so the report specifically requests that the department reports on vocational programs, cognitive behavioral programs, clinical programs, counseling programs, and drug dependency programs.
Okay.
So by realigning, I meant realigning kind of the scope and purpose of this report, rather than to focus narrowly on those types of programs, again, which many of them either DOC doesn't run or really doesn't have the ability to run to engage the effectiveness of, that the report is aligned with our main reporting types, so that we can better express our program as well.
Yeah, I ask because the commission has, of course, jurisdiction for waiver, partial waiver, but when we're getting into the question of content of reports, sort of the substance of what's being reported on, we're going to have to take a closer look at that. So if there's a way to think about what you're requesting here with respect to this local law that's specific to just waiving parts of it, as in removing parts of the report, an element of the report, I would be interested to hear that.
Sure, I mean, I think specifically removing the language around target population and removing language around the way that it's offered. But I will take that feedback back
Yeah,
to our
thank you.
TC program.
Thank you.
And actually on that one, real quick, Dana, just to follow up, I'm also interested, mostly for your kind of internal conversation, why the focus would be just on the referred, even if it is a broader population, and not necessarily tracking the acceptance of said referral.
The individual's
Yeah.
acceptance. I think that's certainly an additional metric that could be added and would be helpful. I think what we're trying to get away from is we're producing a report that says this many people showed up once, this many people participated, and that's how we're gauging effectiveness.
Yeah.
I think we all agree that that's not an effective, that's not a measure of engagement.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Great.
Just one quick question. Do you know what month the local laws in 2017 were enacted? Just so we know when they lapse into our jurisdiction. Is it towards the end of the year, 2016?
The programming report was, I believe, the due date of the first programming report was July. I don't.
Okay. Well, we could look that up.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we have Doris will probably go next because DCAS is running a little late. So Commissioner Toole, sorry to change the schedule a little bit, but if you don't mind my asking you to be next. We'll hear from Commissioner Pauline Toole of Doris next, and then have some questions afterwards. And as a reminder to the Commission, unlike the agencies, Commissioner O'Toole will talk a little bit more about kind of the city's overall reporting efforts and requirements as opposed to any specific agency reporting. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Pauline Toole, Commissioner of the Department of Records and Information Services, commonly known as Doris. As you know, I've been participating as an ad hoc member of the Commission for the past few years, and I appreciate this opportunity to provide testimony on the city government's report requirements. Doris has three main responsibilities: providing guidance on records management policy, preserving and making available government's historical records, and operating a municipal library. The library was established in 1912 as part of the progressive era government reforms. The goal was to gather information on emerging policy and governance issues in order for city policymakers to be as informed as possible. Even in this internet age, the library holds unique and rare reports that document city government's discussions and decisions. Since 2003, the library has taken in digital reports issued by city agencies, and there currently are 23,885 reports available to the public via the government publications portal. The library staff have developed a list of reports that agencies are required to produce. At this point, they have identified 1,272 such reports, although the list continues to grow. The frequency of submission varies from daily to quarterly, by fiscal year, annually, etc. The librarians are constantly reaching out to agencies to remind them to submit reports, answer questions, and guide compliance with the recently enacted local law. It is our view that both the public and city government would be well served if the variety of reports each agency is required to submit could be consolidated into one annual report. 517 of the 1,272 reports are required on an annual basis. Rather than publishing each report separately, the agency could compile the required information and include it as chapters in a larger report. And the due dates for annual reports could be standardized. For example, the Department of Buildings has 12 reports that are due on an annual basis, with 10 different dates, such as no later than 3 months after the end of each fiscal year, by no later than January 30th, on January 1st of each year, by no later than January 31st of each year, etc. We think that if reports were organized in this fashion, when feasible, members of the public would receive a much deeper understanding of agency activities. This is not a radical notion, because this is the way reports have been organized for decades. The information was available, and people could just go to one source as opposed to searching multiple sources. Finally, I think this is relevant to the work of the Report and Advisory Board Review Commission, because it is responsible for reviewing all requirements that mandate the issuance of periodic or multiple reports by city agencies, officers, or employees. This would include whether the reports could be bundled and the standardization of annual submission dates. The Commission's recommendations are then reviewed by the council for further action. The overriding goal of this commission is to improve government efficiency by streamlining the city's report and advisory board requirements. And the approach we are suggesting may move us toward that goal. And I've appended a list of the annual reports by agencies, and you will see that there's quite a number. The DEP has 25. And so they're all due annually. Let's try to coordinate more. So thank you, and if you have questions, I will answer or try to.
But any other, sorry.
I just had one question.
Okay.
Point of information. You mentioned that the staff had identified 1,272 reports. Are those listed? Is the list of reports on the DORS website? Or is that, okay, so you list all,
Publications portal, which is on Dora's website.
okay, so you identify them on the website, all the reports that are listed here.
The librarians just have searched every local law, executive order,
Right.
relevant state law that they could find for reporting requirements. Now, they possibly may have missed one,
Right,
but
right.
they've been working at this pretty
Right.
continuously.
Yeah, no, that's good to know that it's publicly available. Thank you.
Hi. So, first, just a question or two on your testimony, then slightly tangential. Is there an agency that you think would be best for a first look where there happens to be a lot of this sort of disparate dates for annual reports, but where they could be? Or should we just look at the ones with the most annual reports, or is there an agency in particular you think is prime for this?
I don't know if there's an agency in particular, and I think that would be a secondary question as to the first question would be whether or not there's receptivity toward standardizing the issuance of an annual report. And if that were the case, my guess is that the agencies would be very happy to fall in line and submit all of the bundle their information, put it together. I mean, and I don't think that's really going to vary by agency size, right, or the number of reports that are required.
Okay. 'Cause I mean, I know we have tried in bill negotiations, and sometimes City Ledge or an agency will bring up, oh, we have a report due 10 days ahead of that, or 15 days before that. Can we just put it on the same day? And whenever possible, we do try to accommodate that. Sometimes, it's brought up at 11 at night, then less so. But it does make a lot of sense to improve the efficiency and the sanity of everyone involved.
I mean, I think that what happens is when the reports are, when the laws are being written or the executive order is drafted, that happens in a one-off situation, right? And no one has stepped back to say, what's the totality of this?
Yeah.
So this allows the commission to, I think, maybe take a really positive action that will help everyone.
Yeah. And thank you. I did have one question, and because you mentioned it, I can't help myself. So since the local law passed, have agencies been more receptive about providing you with?
I really don't have that.
Okay, I had to.
I'm sure that would be a subject of a different hearing at a different time.
By all means, I couldn't help myself.
Commissioner, just in terms of, I'm intrigued by it, and I actually more would like to open it up to the commissioners. The idea, first, I guess, I just wanted to ask Kwame from a point of order, for the point of the commission, does this commission have the ability potentially to make recommendations as opposed to waiving or other things, but to have a combination of reports packaged together on basically a similar date or a similar thing?
Right. Like I mentioned during the previous testimony, in terms of the content of a report, when it's due, that sort of thing is not clearly within the jurisdiction of the commission. The commission can waive a part of the report or the report in full, meaning, in effect, that the report is no longer due on the date that's required under the law, or the element in that report is no longer due. But when we get into the question of sort of adjusting reports, packaging them together. We'll have to look more closely at that proposal and see if it fits with the language within the charter. But I could say, definitively, something that is about making a part of a report or a report in whole no longer due on the date that's specified in the local law, that is clearly within our jurisdiction.
Something for discussion for the commission, at least, is to, I think it's an intriguing idea, but so I wanted to ask us what.
But the commission can also provide recommendations to the council to take any action that we deemed appropriate, of course. So when it comes to things like that, we find that are potentially outside of our jurisdiction, we of course should consider that.
Mm-hmm. And Commissioner, I know you spoke a lot about potential kind of impact by agencies being able to do this. Just on your agency and the librarians, can you talk a little more how that would impact your ability?
The publications portal is built so that agencies submit their metadata and reports directly, and then the librarians review it and determine if there's an error or if was it submitted or not. But if they had fewer reports to chase down, they would be able to do a much better job, more comprehensive job in making sure that all of the data is accurate, and work with agencies that are having difficulty submitting. So I think it would increase efficiency, and I think we would benefit everyone.
Yeah. Any other questions for first? No?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great suggestion. So I think we'll move on to the next agent. Sorry for the kind of up and down, but if I could invite DCAS up to also give their testimony. All right, sir. Hi, welcome. Feel free to start whenever you'd like.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the Commission, for the opportunity to testify today. I'm Anthony Fiore, I'm Deputy Commissioner for Energy Management at Department of Citywide Administrative Services and Chief Energy Management Officer for the City of New York. I'm joined here today by my colleague, Kyle Way, Assistant Deputy Director for Infrastructure and Energy at the Mayor's Office of Sustainability and Resiliency. We at DCAS and the Mayor's Office of Sustainability think that our reporting requirements are essential tools that will help us perform long-term planning, develop milestones, and measure our progress in meeting the city's goals and commitments. We also believe that these reporting requirements are necessary for operational transparency, and their scrutiny will enable further improvement in our operations. That being said, because of the city's sizable reporting requirements, there are instances where different agencies engaged in parallel efforts end up taking on duplicative mandates. We appreciate that this Commission's core understanding is to consider and vote on the retirement of reporting requirements that are duplicative and onerous on agencies or no longer serve their original intent. With respect to Local Law 1 of 2007, it mandates that every 5 years an assessment is conducted on city-owned facilities with a 500 kilowatt or greater peak demand to determine whether cogeneration and natural gas-based distributed generation projects are appropriate for such facilities. The intent of the law was to address potential constraints in the electric supply system, protect air quality and human health, and reduce emissions, specifically greenhouse gas emissions. Since DCAS serves as the hub for energy management in city-owned facilities, the reporting requirement falls under DCAS's purview. DCAS has submitted 3 reports since the passage of the law in 2008, 2013, and the latest in 2018, with the next one due in 2023. DCAS is requesting that this Commission consider waiving this reporting requirement for the following reasons. Since Local Law 1 was passed in 2007, the energy landscape within New York State has evolved significantly. There have been regulations as conceived in Local Law 1. We're providing emission reductions as well as offering other benefits. First, the carbon intensity of the electric grid has decreased with the retirement of coal and fuel oil plants. And the majority of our electric generation in New York State now comes from natural gas and nuclear energy, with the development of renewable generation being the lion's share of new generation units. The state passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act in 2019, which mandates that 70% of all generation in the state come from renewable energy by 2030 and 100% come from renewable energy by 2040. As such, fossil-based cogeneration will no longer offer the same greenhouse gas, air quality, and public health benefits as originally envisioned. With respect to electric supply capacity concerns, DCAS has other programs that are addressing this. We've significantly expanded our strategies for reducing peak loads on the electric grid. We have grown our demand response program over the last 5 years to a total load reduction commitment of 110 megawatts. While the city government is about 10% of the overall electric consumption for the city, our demand response program contributes 20% of the citywide demand response program. So we're committing much more to that demand response than the rest of the city, and significantly reducing load in times when the grid is constrained and is in danger of brownouts and blackouts. In addition, we have expanded a new program building off of our demand response program. It's a load management program which aims to reduce energy consumption at all times of the day, not just during the grid constraints. That program thus far has reduced our energy usage on average by about 10%, reducing about 67,000 MMBTUs in energy, and reducing about 3,700 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions, which is equivalent of about 800 cars, and saving the city about $1 million. So these programs, along with other energy efficiency measures that DCAS has implemented across the city government portfolio, have reduced summer peak load by about 4% and winter peak load by about 9%. Local Law 248 of 2017 has a similar reporting requirement as Local Law 1 of 2007. It mandates the establishment of a City Energy Policy Advisory Subcommittee and the creation of a long-term energy plan, which is to be updated every 4 years. Per Local Law 248, the city must evaluate the city's current and future energy supply, with the latter term defined to include not only power plants and other facilities that generate energy used in the city, but also distributed generation sources of electricity, including cogeneration and energy storage. Thus, Local Law 248 already explicitly requires consideration of cogeneration applicability within the city. Although fossil power cogeneration negates the benefits of an improved energy generation mix, cogeneration can still provide resiliency benefits for infrastructure that provide critical public services and may serve in facilitating community-based energy democracy. The inherently broader purview of Local Law 248 reporting requirements as compared to that of the current Local Law 1 assessment of technical, physical, and economic feasibility fundamentally sets the stage for potential cogeneration installations to be examined more holistically and to include socioeconomic benefits such as resiliency and equity. So, given the changing landscape of the electric grid and the broad contextual nature of the long-term energy plan required by Local Law 248, it's our collective recommendation that further study of benefits and feasibility of deploying cogeneration be wholly included in the long-term energy plan. This will allow the city to allocate resources efficiently. And with that, I thank you for the opportunity to testify on this important topic, and my colleagues and I are happy to take any questions that you might have.
Hi, thank you for your testimony. So just a question about Local Law 1. I had an opportunity to read it before this meeting, and I noticed that there's an assessment, there's the assessment that's required, right, to determine whether or not it's appropriate to do cogeneration. And then there's the report on the assessment. Can you talk about what the relationship between the assessment and the report is? Does the assessment is there no purpose behind the assessment other than to serve as the data that underlies the report, or does the assessment have some sort of independent purpose?
No, the assessment is the data that underlies that report.
So it wouldn't make any sense to waive, in your view, it wouldn't make any sense to waive the report but then to keep the assessment.
No, I think, one, DCAS, through both our demand side programs and our supply side programs, continually evaluate our portfolio for interventions that can reduce our energy consumption and reduce our emissions with the co-benefits of improving air quality, public health, and resiliency. But all of that is going to be part of the long-term energy plan
And the other
as it is. And DCAS is a part of the long-term energy plan. In fact, we just came from a meeting on the long-term energy plan to this hearing. And so that will all be included in the
Okay, thank you.
So your points are well taken, and the energy landscape has changed a lot since 2007. I did have one question, and it's not I'm just trying to better understand it. So how many facilities are 500 kilowatt or greater peak demand, like roughly?
I don't have the exact number for you, but we could follow up with the exact number. But these are large facilities, so you're talking about hospitals, DEP, wastewater treatment plants, community college campuses, that type of size. So I don't have.
It would be like tens, hundreds, thousands.
Did you?
Total number of facilities that were assessed in 2008 were 303. Out of our portfolio, 4,000. The total number of facilities that were assessed in 2013 were 300. And the total number of facilities that were assessed in 2018, which was the latest report, were 380. And they're assessed based on their past year's peak load if it had hit the 500 kilowatt mark. And so, it varies from year to year, but 380 was the last number.
Great, thank you, and good memory.
Any other questions? Just in terms of, can you think of anything within the local one report that is not currently included in the local law 248 that you would think, just given the commission's ability to also amend, is there anything that you would want to include that would be missing if you did kind of remove this local law 1 reporting requirement?
I think it's quite the opposite, actually, in that the local law 248 that mandates the long-term energy plan is more comprehensive in what it looks at, what criteria it looks at. So right now, local law 1 doesn't include anything about equity or any other socioeconomic criteria or really resiliency that matter. And where local law 248 will look at all that plus the technical and economic criteria that are included within local law 1.
Anybody else? No? Thank you all. Does anyone else want from DCAS to mention anything? Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for your testimony. Thank you very much for kind of presenting that to us. Appreciate it. Now I just want to take a moment to kind of open up for any kind of public comments, knowing that we don't necessarily have anyone who has signed up. Just leave it open for that, and also remind people that if people who are viewing this online want to provide any comments to the commission, there is an address to go to more reports, MOREPORTS, so I think it's Mayor's Office of Reports, but MO Reports at cityhall.nyc.gov.
We don't
and
want more reports.
It says-
We
it
don't.
says it's more-
That would be
it's
very
actually more
counter
reports.
to our
That's right, it's
whole.
more ports.
more ports.
It's actually more ports. So.
More ports, but that is why I spelled it
We
out, to
want more
make sure
ports. We want more
that anyone wants to do this, they can do this at MOREPORTS at cityhall.nyc.gov. If people have any comments or questions to provide to that, please go on that site to do so. That would be great. And then with that, I might just once again ask the commissioner if there are any kind of any further kind of comments or general comments to raise for the purposes of discussion before we move forward.
I just wanted to quickly note, some of the local laws that were presented to us today were enacted in 2017, so we'll just have to look and see when they were enacted, the month of the year, to find out when it comes into our jurisdiction for considering waiver. We'll have to sort of be careful about when we think about when that will occur.
Great, thank you. With that, I don't think there's any further business, so if I could get a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second? All in favor? Well, thank you all for participating, really appreciate it, and thank you for those who are watching. We'll get back, thanks.